A question nobody likes. Have you ever noticed that the hardest English sentence to say is not a long one, not a difficult one, but a very short one? Can you help me? This video is about that sentence. About 2 weeks in my life in the United States, about love, marriage, family, and the quiet pressure that almost broke us. If you are tired of studying English but still feel stuck, if you feel alone even when you are not, stay with me because this story might sound uncomfortably familiar. You don't quit learning English because you are lazy. You quit because somewhere inside you feel stupid for not understanding fast enough. And when that feeling mixes with real life, rent, marriage, family expectations, it becomes heavy. In the last 2 weeks here in the US, I learned something strange. My English was not the biggest problem. My silence was. Let me start with a simple moment. I was standing in a grocery store, holding a carton of milk, staring at the label like it might suddenly explain my life to me. My wife was next to me. We had just argued in the car, not loudly, not dramatically, just the tired kind of argument couples have when both people are exhausted. I wanted to ask her something simple. I needed help choosing the right thing. But my mouth stayed closed. Not because I didn't know the words. I knew them. Which one should we buy? Easy English. But emotionally, impossible. This is where learning English and marriage quietly collide. When you move through life in another language, your brain is always working overtime. Psychologists call this cognitive load. Your brain spends so much energy translating, predicting, correcting, that it becomes allergic to anything that feels like extra risk. Asking for help feels like risk. What if you sound childish? What if the other person is tired? What if you confirm your own fear, that you are not enough? Here's the cruel joke. The brain treats asking for help like danger. Studies in social psychology show that humans systematically overestimate how negatively others will judge them for asking. Your brain whispers, handle it yourself, even when you shouldn't. Especially in a marriage. So there I was, holding milk, holding pride, holding silence. My wife noticed. She always does. She didn't say anything at first. That silence between us was thicker than my accent. And in that moment I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't just avoiding English mistakes. I was avoiding vulnerability. If you are watching this to practice listening, reading, speaking English slowly, good. But I want you to listen to something deeper. Real fluency doesn't start with vocabulary. Starts with permission. Permission to be confused. Permission to be slow. Permission to ask that here's a small exercise you can steal from my life. Today, practice one sentence out loud. Not fast. Not perfect. Just honest. Can you help me with this? Say it in English. Say it even if your voice shakes a little. Especially if it shakes. Because that sentence does something magical. It connects language to life. To the end of that grocery trip, I finally asked. Nothing dramatic happened. No one laughed. No one left. We bought the milk. But something cracked open inside me, in a good way. Sometimes the bravest English sentence is only 3 words long. And maybe the real question isn't how good your English is. Maybe it's this. Where in your life are you still refusing to ask for help? 2 weeks in America. 2 weeks sounds short, almost harmless. Like a vacation. Like nothing important could really happen. But 2 weeks in a foreign country, inside a marriage, inside a second language, can stretch into something much longer. Time behaves differently when your brain is translating every street sign and your heart is translating every emotion. These past 2 weeks in the United States were not dramatic. No big fights. No airport goodbyes. Just life. And life is where things quietly fall apart if you're not paying attention. Every morning started the same way. Coffee that tasted a little too weak. News playing softly in English, fast English, the kind that doesn't wait for you. I would catch words economy, weather, traffic, but miss the feeling. That's the strange part of living in another language. You understand enough to function, but not enough to relax. Your nervous system stays slightly clenched like a fist you forgot to open. My wife noticed it before I did. She asked simple questions. Are you okay? Did you sleep? Normal questions. But when your brain is tired, even love can sound like pressure. I answered quickly. Short sentences. Safe sentences. That's another thing language learners do. We reduce ourselves to what feels manageable. Fewer words. Less emotion. Less risk. Research on emotional regulation shows that when people operate in a non-native language, they often feel emotionally muted. Not because they care less, but because expressing complex feelings requires more cognitive effort. So instead of saying, I feel overwhelmed and a little lost, you say, I'm fine. Easy grammar. Expensive lie. During these 2 weeks, we had small moments that added up. A misunderstanding with the landlord. A doctor's office phone call I avoided. A family video call where everyone spoke at once. Each moment whispered the same message. You should be able to handle this. And every time I didn't ask for help, that message got louder. Here's the connection to learning English that nobody tells you. Motivation doesn't disappear suddenly. It erodes. Slowly. Through moments where you feel alone but pretend you're not. The brain links English with stress. So later, when you sit down to practice listening or speaking, your body resists. Not because you hate English, but because English reminds you of feeling small. One night, after a long day of nothing going right, my wife said something very simple. You don't have to do this alone. She said it slowly, on purpose, as if she was practicing English for me, even though English is easy for her. That moment hurt more than any argument, because it exposed the story I was telling myself, that asking for help makes me a burden. Psychologists call this self-reliance bias. We admire independence so much that we confuse it with isolation. Especially adults. Especially men. Especially immigrants. Your brain thinks strength means silence. But relationships don't work that way. Neither does language learning. So if you're practicing English with this video, here's your real practice for today. Notice when you choose silence instead of a question. Notice how often I'm fine replaces something more honest. Awareness is the first skill. Before pronunciation. Before grammar. 2 weeks in America taught me this. You don't drown because the water is deep. You drown because you don't wave your arms. And waving, awkward, visible, imperfect, that's already a kind of language. Love under pressure. Love is patient, they say. Love is kind. But love under pressure becomes a mirror. It shows you things you'd rather not see. Especially when you're living in another language. These 2 weeks in the US taught me that English didn't create pressure in my marriage. It simply revealed where the pressure already was. Here's a strange truth. When life is easy, love can survive on habits. When life gets hard, love needs language. Not poetic language. Honest language. And honesty is the first thing to disappear when you feel linguistically weak. My wife and I didn't fight about big things. We fought about timing, tone, tiny misunderstandings that felt stupid the moment they happened. I would say something flat. She would hear something cold. I would stay quiet. She would feel shut out. None of this was intentional. It was friction, emotional friction caused by mental fatigue. Neuroscience explains this better than I can. When your brain is under constant cognitive load, like operating daily in a second language, it has fewer resources left for empathy. You don't become less loving. You become less expressive. Your emotional bandwidth shrinks. So instead of explaining how you feel, you retreat. And retreat in a relationship looks a lot like rejection. One night we were sitting on the couch. No phones. No TV. Just silence. The dangerous kind. She finally asked, "Why do you always go quiet when things get hard?" I wanted to answer with something mature. Something balanced. Something emotionally intelligent. What came out instead was broken English and a long pause. "I don't know how to say it right," I said. That sentence did more for our marriage than 100 perfect conversations, because for the first time I wasn't hiding behind competence. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was admitting limitation. And here's where this matters for you practicing English right now. Speaking slowly and perfectly emotionally, that's not a failure. That's advanced usage. Children learn language by expressing need. Adults try to learn language by avoiding embarrassment. Guess who learns faster? There's a psychological concept called emotional attunement. Couples feel safe when they sense each other's internal states. But attunement requires signals, words, pauses, tone. When you remove language, your partner starts guessing. And the brain is terrible at guessing kindly under stress. After that conversation, something shifted. Not magically, not instantly, but softly. I started saying simple things. "I'm tired. I feel lost today. Can you explain that again?" Basic English. Powerful meaning. My wife responded differently, not because my grammar improved, but because my honesty did that. So here's a practical exercise you can try, even alone. Take one emotional sentence in your native language. Something real. Then translate it into the simplest English possible. Not beautiful. Not impressive. Just clear. Say it out loud. Your brain will resist. That resistance is the edge of growth. Love under pressure doesn't need better vocabulary. It needs permission to be clumsy, to be slow, to ask twice. Fluency in a relationship is not about speed. It's about accuracy of feeling. The irony? The more I allowed myself to sound bad in English, the closer we became. And the closer we became, the easier English felt. Because safety reduces cognitive load. And safety starts with saying what you need, even badly. In the end, pressure doesn't destroy love. Silence does. And silence often wears the mask of strength. But strength I'm learning sounds a lot like this. I need help saying this. Marriage and silence. Silence in marriage is rarely peaceful. Just pretends to be. It sits there like a well-trained animal, not moving, not making noise, while quietly controlling the room. During these 2 weeks, I learned that silence was my favorite coping strategy, and my most dangerous one. I didn't choose silence because I didn't care. I chose it because it felt efficient. Less talking meant fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes meant less embarrassment. And less embarrassment felt like safety. At least that's what my brain told me. But brains are excellent liars when they're tired. There's a concept in psychology called avoidance coping. When something feels overwhelming, your brain looks for the fastest way to reduce discomfort. Not the healthiest way, just the fastest. For me, speaking English about emotions felt like standing on thin ice. So I stayed quiet. Ice doesn't crack if you don't move, right? Wrong. It cracks slowly underneath you. My wife felt it before I named it. She said the house felt heavy. Same rooms. Same routines. Different air. Silence creates interpretation gaps. And when people care about each other, those gaps usually fill with self-blame. Did I do something wrong? Did I say too much? Not enough. Silence makes the other person do emotional labor you don't see. Point 1 afternoon. We argued about something embarrassingly small. Dishes. Not even all the dishes, just 1 cup. The argument wasn't loud. It was sharp. And suddenly she said, "I can't read your mind." That sentence landed hard. 'Cause she was right. I was asking her to translate my emotions without giving her language. Here's where English learning sneaks back in. When you avoid speaking, you also avoid feedback. Linguists call this fossilization, errors that stay forever because you never risk correcting them. The same thing happens emotionally. Patterns freeze. Distance becomes normal. That day I forced myself to do something uncomfortable. I spoke slowly. I used short sentences. I repeated myself. I'm not angry. I'm overwhelmed. My head feels full. That was it. No metaphors. No perfect timing. Just basic English. But something softened immediately. Because clarity, even imperfect clarity, relieves anxiety. If you're watching this to practice listening and speaking, notice how silence feels in your own life. Do you pause because you're thinking, or because you're hiding? There's a difference. Thinking leads to better words. Hiding leads to disconnection. Here's a simple practice backed by behavioral psychology. Name the state before the story. Instead of explaining everything, start with 1 label. Tired, confused, scared, stressed. Labels reduce emotional intensity. They also buy you time to speak. I'm stressed. Give me a minute. That sentence can save a conversation. And it's easy English. Marriage doesn't need constant talking. But it does need signals. Silence without explanation feels like abandonment, even if that's not your intention. And the cruel part is that the quieter you get, the more distance you create, then the harder it feels to speak. By the end of that week, I understood something painfully simple. Silence isn't neutral. It always sends a message. If you don't choose the message, your partner will. And usually they choose the one that hurts them most. So if English feels like a wall, don't hide behind it. Use it like a window. Open it a little. Even cracked open lets air in. And sometimes air is all a marriage needs to breathe again. Family expectations. Family expectations are funny. They rarely sound like pressure. They sound like concern, like advice, like love with good intentions. And that's why they're so heavy. During these 2 weeks, I realized I wasn't only carrying my own stress. I was carrying invisible voices from both sides of our families. Phone calls came at odd hours. Messages full of questions. Are you settled yet? Is everything okay? You should be strong. No one said, don't struggle. They didn't have to. The message was already there. In many cultures, especially ours, adulthood equals endurance. Marriage equals responsibility. Asking for help equals weakness. Here's the problem. When you live in the US in English under a new system, those expectations don't disappear. They follow you. They sit quietly in your head while you're trying to listen, speak, survive. Your brain becomes a courtroom and everyone has an opinion about how you should be doing. Psychology has a term for this: internalized standards. They are rules you never consciously agreed to but still obey. I shouldn't complain. I shouldn't bother my partner. I should figure this out myself. These rules drain emotional energy. And when emotional energy is gone, language is the first thing to collapse. I noticed it during a family video call. Everyone was talking fast, laughing, giving advice. My English shrank. My voice got smaller. I nodded more than I spoke. After the call, my wife asked, "Why didn't you say anything?" I didn't have a good answer. The truth was, I felt like I had to perform stability. Neuroscience tells us that social evaluation activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Your body reacts to judgment, even imagine judgment as threat. So your nervous system does what it does best. Protects you. By keeping you quiet. By making you invisible. But invisibility has a cost. In marriage, it creates imbalance. One person carries emotion. The other carries silence. That's not partnership. That's survival mode. That night, I finally said something honest. I feel like I have to be okay for everyone. Simple sentence. Plain English. No drama. My wife didn't fix it. She didn't argue. She just said, "You don't have to be okay with me." And something loosened in my chest. If you're learning English, here's a powerful exercise that has nothing to do with grammar. Identify one expectation you're carrying that nobody actually asked you to carry. Say it out loud. In English if you can. I feel like I must. Then finish the sentence. Awareness breaks the spell. Family expectations don't disappear when you cross borders. But you can choose which ones you obey. Strength is not doing everything alone. Strength is knowing where support belongs. And maybe the bravest sentence you can say in English, in marriage, in life is not "I'm fine," but "This is hard for me." That sentence doesn't disappoint family. It protects your future. English as a wall. English didn't feel like a tool these 2 weeks. It felt like a wall. Not a dramatic wall, not a scary one. Just a quiet, stubborn wall you keep bumping into while pretending you're fine. And the hardest part? From the outside, it looks invisible. People assume you're okay because you're standing there, nodding, smiling, surviving. Here's the lie we tell ourselves as language learners. Once my English is better, life will be easier. But in reality, life doesn't wait for your English. Bills arrive. Relationships need attention. Feelings don't pause. So you end up living life through a narrow opening, squeezing your thoughts into the simplest possible shapes. During these 2 weeks, I avoided situations not because I couldn't handle them, but because I didn't want to expose the wall. Phone calls were the worst. On the phone, you lose context, no facial expressions, no gestures, no time to prepare. Just raw English. Fast. Unforgiving. So I delayed calls. Let emails sit. Told myself I'd do it later. That later never feels safer. Linguists talk about effective filters. When anxiety is high, your brain literally blocks language input. You hear English, but it doesn't stick. You try to speak, but words hide. The wall gets taller the more you fear it. And fear grows fastest in silence. This wall didn't just affect me. It affected my marriage. I'd say, "It's fine, I'll handle it," when what I meant was, "I don't have the energy to fight English right now." My wife offered help. I refused, not proudly but automatically. Because asking meant admitting the wall was real. One afternoon, I finally let her sit next to me while I made a simple call. She didn't speak. She didn't correct me. She just stayed. That presence lowered my heart rate. Science backs this up. Social support reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. Less stress means better access to language. The wall didn't disappear, but it cracked. If you're practicing English with this video, here's a concrete technique. Practice English with someone, not for someone. Don't perform. Don't impress. Just share space. Say things slowly. Let mistakes exist. Your nervous system learns safety before fluency. English becomes a wall when you face it alone. It becomes a door when someone stands with you. And doors don't require perfect pronunciation, just the courage to push. The wall I feared wasn't made of vocabulary. It was made of pride. And pride, unlike English, doesn't help you connect. The brain hates asking. Your brain hates asking for help. Not dislikes. Hates. It treats it like a threat, the same way it treats heights or rejection. That's not a personality flaw, it's biology. And once I understood that, a lot of my behavior during these 2 weeks finally made sense. From an evolutionary perspective, humans survive by belonging. Being seen as weak risked exclusion. So your brain learned a simple rule. Don't expose limitation. Even today, in a safe apartment with a loving partner, your nervous system still runs outdated software. It whispers, "Handle it yourself." Neuroscientists call this threat prediction. Your brain predicts social danger before it happens. And when you're operating in a second language, that prediction gets louder. Because language errors feel like public mistakes. Your brain doesn't care that this is modern life. It reacts as if your survival depends on sounding competent. That's why asking for help in English feels harder than asking in your native language. You're not just asking for support. You're exposing your accent, your pauses, your uncertainty. Triple risk. During these weeks, I caught myself doing something absurd. I would spend 30 minutes struggling alone instead of spending 30 seconds asking a question. That's the brain protecting ego at the cost of energy. Psychologists call this ego depletion. You waste mental fuel maintaining an image instead of solving the problem. One evening, after a long day, my wife asked me directly, "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" I answered honestly for the first time, "Because I didn't want to look weak." Saying that out loud felt embarrassing, but it also felt true. And truth has a calming effect. Studies show that naming fear reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. Once named, fear loses power. Here's the English practice hidden inside this science. When you say, "I need help," you're not just communicating. You're retraining your nervous system. You're teaching your brain that asking does not equal danger. Repetition rewires response. Try this micro practice. Say the sentence, "Can you help me?" 3 times out loud. Slowly, even if no one is there. Your body may tense. That's okay. That tension is old programming. You're updating it in marriage. This matters deeply. Asking for help invites partnership. Refusing help creates distance disguised as strength. The brain confuses independence with safety, but humans are safest together. The irony? The moment I started asking more, people judged me less. Or maybe they always judged me less, I just stopped imagining the judgment. Most people are too busy with their own fears to analyze yours. So if your English feels stuck, don't start with more vocabulary. Start with one brave sentence. The brain hates it at first. Then it learns. And learning, like love, requires risk. A small breaking point. Breaking points are rarely loud. They don't announce themselves with tears or slammed doors. Most of the time they show up as something small, almost boring. Mine arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in a very ordinary problem. We were trying to fill out a form. Just a form. Name, address, insurance. The kind of thing adults do without drama. I read the questions 3 times. The words were simple, but my brain felt full, like a browser with too many tabs open. My wife waited quietly, not impatient, just present. And suddenly I couldn't do it. Not because I didn't understand the English, but because I didn't have space left inside my head. That's what chronic cognitive load does. It doesn't make you stupid. It makes you tired. That I stared at the paper and felt that familiar urge, pretend. Say I'd do it later. Close the form. Protect the image. My brain screamed, "Don't ask." But something else was louder. Exhaustion. So I said it. Slowly. "Can you help me with this?" My voice sounded smaller than I wanted, but it sounded real. Nothing bad happened. The ceiling didn't fall. My wife didn't sigh or lecture. She moved her chair closer. We read the questions together. One by one. My shoulders dropped without me noticing. That's the parasympathetic nervous system turning on, the body's signal that it's safe. This is what psychology means when it says connection regulates emotion. You don't calm down by thinking harder. You calm down by not being alone. For English learners, this moment is gold. Because your best learning doesn't happen when you push through stress. It happens right after stress is reduced. Studies on language acquisition show that low-anxiety environments dramatically improve comprehension and retention. Asking for help isn't a weakness, it's a learning strategy. That afternoon changed something subtle in my marriage. I stopped performing competence. I started sharing process. And process is where intimacy lives. Here's a practical takeaway. Next time you feel stuck in English, don't ask, "How do I say this perfectly?" Ask, "Who can I say this with?" Then speak slowly. Let silence exist. Let correction be gentle. That small breaking point didn't break me. It broke the illusion that I had to do everything alone. And once that illusion cracked, English stopped being a test. It became a shared activity. Sometimes the bravest moment in life is not standing tall, but sitting down next to someone and saying, "I can't carry this by myself." Learning to say help. The word help looks harmless on paper. For letters. Soft sound. Nothing sharp. But inside your body it can trigger a full emergency response. Heart tightens. Shoulders rise. Voice hesitates. Asking for help doesn't just activate language, it activates identity. Who am I if I need help? Am I failing? Am I falling behind? Am I a burden? After that small breaking point with the form, I started paying attention to how deeply this word was connected to my English journey. Before, I treated English like a test. Something you pass or fail in private. You study. You perform. You hide mistakes. But once I allowed myself to say help, English stopped being a performance and started becoming a relationship. Here's what surprised me most. My listening improved faster than my speaking. That sounds backwards, but science explains it well. When anxiety drops, the brain's auditory processing improves. Stress floods your system with cortisol, which narrows attention. Safety widens it. By asking for help, I wasn't just getting answers, I was calming my nervous system. And a calm brain hears more. I began practicing help the way people practice pronunciation. On purpose. In small moments. Low stakes. At home, I'd say to my wife, "Can you help me say this sentence more naturally?" Notice the structure. Simple present. Clear intention. No apology. No long explanation. Just need a tea first. My brain resisted. Said, "You should know this already." That voice is not truth. It's conditioning. Psychologists call it the inner critic, but I think of it as outdated software. It hasn't been updated for real life. In marriage, this shift was powerful. Before, when I didn't understand something emotionally or linguistically, I withdrew. Now I asked, "Can you help me understand what you mean?" That sentence did something important. It slowed the conversation. It told my partner I cared enough to clarify instead of assume. That's intimacy. Not grand gestures. Micro requests for understanding. And here's something no one tells English learners. Asking for help is advanced communication. Beginners memorize phrases. Intermediate learners avoid mistakes. Advanced learners negotiate meaning. They ask questions. They repair misunderstandings. They collaborate. That's real fluency. I also noticed something else. The more I said help, the less dramatic it felt. Repetition desensitizes fear. This is basic exposure therapy. You do the thing. Your brain expects danger. Nothing bad happens. The fear shrinks. Next time it's easier so I built a small habit. One help a day. That's it. Not a crisis level request. Just one moment where I could have stayed silent but didn't. Sometimes it was about English. Sometimes about emotions. Sometimes about life logistics. Each time the same result. Relief first, confidence later. If you're practicing English with this video, try this exercise. Write down 3 versions of the word help. Can you help me? I need help with this. Can you help me understand? Say them slowly, out loud. Don't rush. Let your body notice that nothing bad is happening. That's learning, not memorization. Regulation. By the end of these 2 weeks, I understood something clearly. Saying help didn't make me weaker. It made my learning lighter, my marriage warmer, my English more alive. Because language was never meant to be carried alone. Maybe fluency doesn't start when you know enough words. Maybe it starts when you stop pretending you don't need them. Love grows softer. There's a quiet transformation that happens when you stop proving you're strong and start allowing yourself to be supported. Love doesn't become dramatic, doesn't suddenly feel like a movie. It becomes softer. And softness, despite what we were taught, is not weakness. Softness is adaptability. It bends instead of breaking. During the last part of those 2 weeks in the US, I felt that change settle into our marriage in a very real, very ordinary way. Before, love felt like responsibility, like a job description we both took seriously. Who wakes up early? Who handles paperwork? Who stays calm when things get confusing? It worked, but it was rigid. And rigidity is exhausting, especially when English is already draining your mental energy. I didn't realize how tense we were until that tension began to fade. Once I started asking for help, I stopped performing competence. And the moment performance disappeared, connection had room to show up. I noticed my wife's voice soften when she spoke to me in English. Not slower in a teaching way, but slower in a caring way. That difference matters. One feels like evaluation. The other feels like inclusion. Psychology explains this beautifully. Humans are wired for co-regulation. Our nervous systems talk to each other constantly. When one person is guarded, the other stays alert. When one person relaxes, the other feels permission to do the same. Asking for help signaled something deeper than need. It signaled trust. And trust is contagious. This shift changed how conflicts felt. We still misunderstood each other. English didn't magically fix that. But misunderstandings stopped feeling dangerous. When I didn't understand her words, I said it. Can you say that another way? No apology. No defensiveness. And she didn't hear it as incompetence. She heard it as effort. For English learners, this is an important lesson. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is flow. And flow requires safety. When you feel safe, your brain releases dopamine, the learning chemical. That's when new words stick. That's when pronunciation improves naturally. Not because you forced it, but because your body allowed it. I also noticed how love shows up in very simple English. Not impressive sentences. Gentle ones. It's okay. I'm here. Take your time. These phrases are beginner-level English, but emotionally they're advanced. They lower defenses. They reduce cognitive load. They create space. Here's a practice you can try today. Choose one soft sentence in English and use it intentionally. Say it slower than normal. Notice how it changes the atmosphere. Soft language creates soft responses. By the end of those 2 weeks, I understood something important. Love doesn't grow stronger by carrying more alone. It grows softer by carrying together. And in that softness, English stopped feeling like an exam. It started feeling like a bridge. Maybe real fluency isn't sounding perfect. Maybe it's feeling safe enough to keep speaking, even when your voice is quiet. Practice through life. For a long time, I believed practice had to look serious to be effective. Quiet room, headphones on, perfect focus. Anything less felt like cheating. But real life doesn't care about your study plan. Real life interrupts. It overlaps. It arrives messy and emotional. And during these 2 weeks, I realized something uncomfortable but freeing. If English can't survive inside your real life, it won't survive at all. Before this, I treated English like a separate project. Something I would get back to once things were calmer. Once marriage felt stable. Once work made sense. Once emotions stopped being loud. The problem is, life never gets quieter just to help you study. So English stayed stuck in the waiting room with all my good intentions. When I started asking for help, English slipped into my days without permission. It showed up when I didn't understand a letter. When I felt frustrated but didn't know how to explain why. When my wife asked a simple question and I needed more time to answer. These were not study moments. They were life moments. And that's why they worked. Cognitive psychology explains this through embodied learning. The brain learns better when language is connected to action and emotion. When you speak while doing something real, multiple neural pathways activate at once. That makes memory stronger. So when I practiced English while washing dishes or walking outside or sitting in silence after a hard conversation, my brain remembered more. With less effort, I also stopped correcting myself mid-sentence. This was hard. Adults hate sounding wrong. But self-correction increases cognitive load. Pulls attention away from meaning and into fear. Instead, I finished the thought first. Meaning before accuracy. That alone made speaking less exhausting. Marriage became my most honest practice space. Not because it was easy, but because it was safe. I used English to describe emotions in their raw form. I feel tired but not sleepy. I'm okay but not happy yet. These sentences are grammatically simple, but emotionally precise. Precision matters more than complexity. Here's a daily practice you can try, backed by memory research. At night, choose one moment from your day that had emotion, positive or negative. Describe it out loud in English for 1 minute. No script. No editing. This mirrors how the brain consolidates experience during sleep. You're not just practicing English. You're teaching your brain that English belongs to your life. The biggest shift was this. I stopped asking, "Did I practice English today?" and started asking, "Did I use English honestly today?" Some days the answer was yes, even if I only said 3 sentences. Those days mattered more than long force sessions. Practice through life feels slower, but it's deeper. And depth is what lasts. English doesn't need a perfect environment. It needs permission to exist where you actually live. When language becomes part of your emotional world, you don't need motivation anymore. You need presence. And presence is something you already have. Where you need help, At the end of these 2 weeks, the question that stayed with me wasn't about vocabulary, pronunciation, or how fast I could understand Netflix without subtitles. It was a quieter question, one that followed me into the kitchen, into conversations, into silence. Where do you need to ask for help? Not in theory. Not when English is better. Right now. In your real, slightly messy life. Because here's the truth most English learning videos don't say out loud. People don't quit English because they're incapable. They quit because English becomes emotionally heavy. It turns into a reminder of everything they haven't figured out yet. Money, marriage, identity, direction. So every listening exercise feels like pressure. Every speaking attempt feels like exposure. And slowly, without noticing, you stop showing up. That's what almost happened to me in these 2 weeks in the US. English stopped being a subject and became a mirror. It reflected where I was still trying to be invincible. Where I was still confusing silence with strength. Where I was still telling myself I should be able to handle this. And marriage, real marriage, doesn't survive on should. It survives on honesty. When I finally started asking for help, something unexpected happened. I didn't just feel supported. I felt more present. My listening improved because I wasn't panicking. My speaking improved because I wasn't performing. My reading improved because I wasn't rushing. Science explains this clearly. When the brain feels safe, it learns faster. Safety is not comfort. Safety is permission to be imperfect. So if you're here to practice listening, reading, speaking English slowly, I want you to hear this part clearly. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are just tired of carrying things alone. And language was never meant to be carried alone. Let me ask you gently but honestly, where in your life are you still saying I'm fine when you're not? Where are you still avoiding one simple sentence because it feels too vulnerable? Maybe it's, can you help me understand? Maybe it's, I don't know how to say this. Maybe it's, I need more time. These are not weak sentences. These are fluent sentences. Because they create connection. Here's your final practice. And it's also your invitation. After this video ends, don't open another one immediately. Pause. Take a breath. And say one sentence out loud in English. Slowly. I need help with. Finish it honestly. No grammar check. No judging yourself. Just let the sentence exist. That moment, awkward, quiet, real, is where learning actually begins. And if this story felt familiar, if it felt like someone finally said what you've been carrying silently, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video so it reaches someone else who's struggling quietly. Comment one word about where you need help. English, love, life, just one word is enough. Subscribe to this channel because I'll keep making videos like this. Slow English, real stories, no pressure, no pretending. You don't need more motivation. You need permission. Permission to be human while learning. Permission to ask. Permission to go slowly and still move forward.